From the beginning?
No, just call roll.
Okay, so starting with, if you are here, please say present. Val Young. Michelle Cron. I see her on the call that she's muted. Okay, Edith Campbell. Okay, Layla Garnes.
Present.
Thank you. Robert Lee with Roanoke and Easton Community. Okay. Carolyn Highsmith, Coalition for Equity in Public Education.
Here.
Thank
Ones
you.
that'll be there anyway tonight.
Leroy Davis, Black Philanthropy. Okay, so then Emily Shutt, Fees and Action for Equity. Okay, thank you, Emily. Dr. Pam Peoples Joyner with the Winston-Salem Police Department. Thank you. Katie Stone Lee, Action for Equity.
Present.
Thank you. Michelle Higgins, Curtisville. Not sure how to pronounce her name. Is it Tamilia Covington with the Ministers Alliance? All right. Megan Gregory.
Present.
Thank you. Pastor Daniel Sostacia. And Vivian Perez Chandler, College and Career Director of Woodson Family YMCA. Okay. If I didn't call your name, would you please identify yourself if you're on this committee, just to make sure we have all of our community partners accounted for?
This is, I was present but unmuted, did not unmute when you called my name.
Okay, tell me your name again.
I think you called my name and I had it on mute and didn't say present at the time that you called it verbally, so.
Okay, good. I have you marked present. Thank you,
Okay.
Michelle.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Let's see, 1, 2, 7, 11. Is 11 enough for a quorum? Is it a 2/3? Okay. Okay. All right, great. We're gonna start with our discussion item, and that's the cooperative strategies update with David Sturkey.
Good afternoon. All right, let me go ahead and get screen sharing here. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect, okay. Well, good evening, everybody, members of the board, superintendent, citizen stakeholders. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is David Sturtz. I'm with Cooperative Strategies. We are a K-12 planning firm. I am joined by Chris Schmidt and Karen Daniel Hamburg on our project team. And Karen will be chiming in here towards the latter half of the presentation on some of the options and details here as we speak through them. And wanted to just go ahead and get started into a bit of the history of what we have done and where this is going. And when we get through some of the background data and the background process, then we hope to turn this into a workshop format, a dialogue, so that we can discuss some of the fork in the road that we're at right now with some of the different options that have emerged through the process. Get your feedback on those options. We would like some of your thoughts on the benefits and the challenges of those options, any additional ideas you may have. And we will take those notes and work with the executive team, the cabinet, to process into a set of recommendations. So to focus the specifics of our scope, when our firm was contracted, it was a referral from Guilford County for our planning efforts there. And we were requested to come in and do a strategic plan alignment for your choice programs. So the end state goal, in my interpretation here on the screen, is to focus our efforts, focus the district efforts and resources on high quality, well-defined magnet pathways that are accessible and sustainable in every sense of those words. Accessible to students geographically, accessible based upon meeting supply with demand, sustainable in terms of being resourced well enough to be able to sustain them with having enough for these programs for growth without too many of them to dilute your resources and therefore not make them sustainable or high quality and highly resourced. So in general, we were brought in, and the setup was that the choice program and the choice options had been created over time, and some of the pathways don't really align K-12 distinctly in terms of defining a specific program that one matriculates from elementary to middle and finds continuity of program there that makes sense, like a STEAM program that is aligned all the way K-12, Montessori, the IB. You have different programs with different levels of definition, and our task was to work with the data on attendance and capacity, to work on choice, to work with your staff on the visions for programs, to work with some of the survey data that you've gathered through partners like Foresight Futures, and to try to identify what exactly would be a core group of program offerings, where would those be, and how would those look K-12? Which buildings? How would those buildings need modified? Where would these programs need to be located to be accessible? So in order to start this process, we held a series of visioning meetings with the executive team, the cabinet, and staff members to discuss the vision for each of the programs. We compared your current choice programs with the sort of design specifications that are standard for such programs. For example, obviously, if you're going to having a visual and performing arts program, you want access to defined art rooms that are designed for those things and not just repurposed classrooms. You want down to things like clay traps, and you want some of that material on the inside. You want performance space. You want to have the building support the program. Same thing for your other choice programs. And then we also looked at comparing where students were attending versus where they lived and how that data broke down by specific choice zone and by specific program to try to answer the question, what is attracting folks to this school? Are they attracted to the area, or are they attracted to the program? This was the initial analysis that we performed in pre-COVID times when we met with you in person, before we've been relegated to Zoom and Teams since, and thus had a long delay in the process. So in the visioning with key staff last summer, what we came out from that was that the magnet and choice programs should be comprehensive K-12. They should be specifically and explicitly aligned, and that professional development and programmatic feeders should be explicit and built as such. That we should move away from having a magnet or a choice program defined by simply having a class or a couple extra classes at a school, but rather have it be a robust, defined, well-attended, critical mass of students in a program that is intentionally there and intentionally supported in every respect operationally and capital. That we need a strong vision, appropriate facilities, and dedicated staff. That the school within the school model is challenging, and the desire at the time was hey, let's see if we can look at having entire schools dedicated to a magnet. What some of the data that's challenged that is the fact that you simply don't have the capacity to do so. You have, when we look just at your permanent capacity, you are very tight district-wide, and full sort of philosophy aside on choice programs, physically you would struggle to house exclusive magnets to scale. To centralize the programs and locations insofar as possible to increase accessibility, offering diverse locations around the district for the same program so that there is geographic accessibility. Another thing that came out was that right out of the bat, when interviewing staff about your programs, what we heard and have had verified in various discussions is that the experiential and multiple intelligence and magnets at this point really are no longer offering a unique, robust, strategic program K-12, and that really that the theories behind them are good teaching pedagogies for all, rather than defining a specific program that's distinct, that we can write curriculum specific for it that's different than what should be offered elsewhere for elementary, middle, and high. And so right out of the gate in some of these visioning meetings, what we heard from staff was in order to focusing our magnet efforts so that we have high quality strategic choice K-12, that we should phase out the idea that there are multiple intelligences and experiential magnet programs. There's more of a handful of offerings at different schools that have been lumped together rather than intentionally built up from the bottom up. So those are two programs right away that the recommendation was to move away from thinking of them as magnet and choice programs and to focus the district's efforts on the visual performing arts, on dual languages and IB, and on STEM as the dominant choice programs that would be led from the top, from the central office. So the goal again is to focus on these high quality, well-defined pathways. So from the capital side, what we did, and we have reports behind all of these numbers. We have reports behind the live attend analyses. You saw that about a little over a year ago. And what this is just showing that when we define some of those key educational space standards that we want to see, typically at STEM schools, at dual language IB schools, at visual performing arts schools, here's the current delta or estimated rough order of magnitude cost to remedy those buildings, to have all the different spaces that you would want to see as a standard. These are, of course, the standards were something that we brought to the table from our work doing design standards for some of these types of programs around the country, and they are to be considered rough order of magnitude. It's just to give you an idea of how much capital investment there would need. And frankly, relative to typical capital needs, these are not very big numbers. What this tells you is that by and large, many of the programs in the schools that they are in, the schools are fairly well equipped to support the programs. There would be some ways that we could suggest involving some of these kind of programmatic investments in your future CIP and master planning. But on the whole, most of the buildings have sort of your core spaces that you would be looking for. We also compared the students attending each program compared to those program locations. And what you see here is a heat map, a thunderstorm map, and what it really is more technically is a student density map. So I mentioned our live and attend analyses. So this is showing your STEM program and your visual and performing arts program. You see at the elementary, middle, and high levels, where the elementary is that turquoise square, the middle is your orange triangle, and your high school is the purple star. The dark lines that you see, the boundary lines, these are your elementary zones, the choice zones. So what this map tells you on the left is that the attendance to the STEM programs are diffused around the district. This has relatively high pull from around the district, and certainly there's a concentration towards the center, which makes sense in many respects. That's where the schools are located, population densities, and so forth. But there's a fairly broad appeal. With the visual performing arts, there is still some broad appeal, but it is certainly, you can see that that concentration of density where the students' geography has a much stronger, it appears, impact on choice into those programs as they currently stand than does STEM. When you, and you can see that the red is more density and the green is less. Dual language, you can see that concentration. International baccalaureate, there's significant overlap here. And so there's the maps are essentially one and the same, just a little bit more in the IB, but you can see the familiar patterns between the two. Still, clustering of attendance around those schools where they are geographically. So what this tells us right out of the gate, geography matters, location matters, and it appears to matter the least for STEM, which, as we read the Foresight Futures survey data and the high degree of demand and interest in STEM, you know, that makes sense. The visual that we see here dovetails with that broad appeal and high demand for STEM programming. Now, there may be other factors at play, of course, but just as a correlation, I find that notable. Okay. So we're getting, so that's the broad overview of some of the analyses that have been done to date. As mentioned, we have specific deeper dives into these different data sets, deeper dives into your capacities and where students are coming from and where they're going to, and all of that information that will be an appendix to this report and subsequent ones. But for the purposes of tonight, what we're here to do is to do some options work with you to say, okay, looking at the goal of creating defined K through 12 magnet pathways, looking at the data that we have thus far in the interviews with staff and from the survey data from Foresight Futures, and seeing the high degree of interest in STEM, the high degree of interest in visual performing arts that we see from that survey, as well as interest in IB and language, though notably not as strong as the previous two that you noted in that survey. Looking at the patterns of choice we have there in the capacities of schools, we're attempting to see, can we come up with some pathways here of maybe a 2-to-1-to-1 program feeder, 2 elementary schools, 1 middle, 1 high, for visual performing arts, for the IB dual language, for STEM in particular, and looking at, do we have the best fit where they are? Do we have some other places that we could move these schools maybe to be more accessible, to be better positioned to support the programs from a capacity or adequacy standpoint? The 2-to-1-to-1 feeder, the suggestion is based upon trying to thread the needle between having enough accessibility geographically across the district without spreading yourself so thin that you're unable to be intentional and resource these programs at a high level. And so also considering the fact that you will have to share capacity at your elementary, middle, and high schools, looking at where those are located so that we can anticipate sufficient neighborhood seats for kids who want to attend the neighborhood school portion of that program, and not force people out of their neighborhood because we're taking over too much of that school's capacity for program, while having enough critical mass there to have a robust program. So it's a balancing act. I know I've been speaking for a long time, so with going through lots of different data. So before we get too far into some of the options, which the next slides will propose, I wanted to stop and see if there's any questions or needed clarifications.
This is Board Member Jones. I had, I guess, just a clarifying point for me to be on the right page, but the dual language programs for elementary, I just see that SPEACE was on there. Can we stop the program at Smith Farm?
It shows up further in the presentation. I don't think it's.
I guess I just saw in the building analysis, there was in the dual language that we don't have them listed, in that particular slide. And so I know it's a newer facility, but I was thinking that it probably needed some, to be addressed in some way there. So I just didn't see it there. And I think the other, I guess the other piece is that in the magnet conversation, are we looking at magnets that we already have at this point and not really looking to other magnets that we may be able to bring in? Is that kind of where we are with the conversation? We shouldn't talk about magnets we might want to see, but we're really focusing on streamlining what we have.
That's a great question. I'd like somebody from the district to chime in on that one as well. But our understanding and sort of charge from the beginning was to look at the existing programs and to see, that supply demand kind of analysis. Where do you have the greatest demand and where it makes sense to house them, and are those indeed the programs that are desired? And that's part of the collaboration with Forsyth Futures, was to have them do some of that qualitative analysis on what parents were looking for. And in our read of that, the arts and STEM certainly jumped out as high demand programs.
And I think and this may be something for someone in the district, but I think as I'm trying to move through this, maybe I need a refresher on the timeline and purpose for the choice committee. Is this piece just the first piece, or we just starting to talk about the magnets, and from the magnet conversation and where we decide to position magnets, does the conversation then talk about the entire choice plan? Is this kind of what we're saying our anchor is going to be around the magnet piece, and we're moving forward? I don't think I've not had clarity on that.
Yeah, I think both the survey and at the end of this presentation, we're going to talk about next steps to gather yet more information from the community.
Mm-hmm.
I think all of this is gathering data, gathering information about what the community and what our students want as far as magnet programs. So I think it's just a general fact-finding mission at this point, but I think we need to come back with what are the next steps then after this. We have Forsyth Futures present, we have this presentation tonight. We need to come back to then what are next steps. And so I'm looking at this evening and as the last presentation as information gathering at this point.
Okay, I'm going to call on Board Member Bonsinger. Do you have your hand up?
Yes. Thank you so much, Ms. Crowley. I have a lot of the same concerns that Dana brought up. One being that ultimately, I feel that the board and the district as a whole and parents should be weighing in more than I'm hearing from this presentation. And I also think we've had a change in superintendent. I always like to empower the district itself to be doing some of the work and relationships with our parents, with our staff. And so what I'm seeing is almost we got the data and this is what we came up with. And honestly, I'm a little uncomfortable with that. Just in terms of historically, that isn't my understanding of how we've done things. I also would really like to point out that we had talked quite a bit and have been brought up repeatedly, the desire for a Montessori elementary school and possibly a freedom school elementary. I know there's a freedom school in Charleston that is run as a charter school, but that I just want us to be looking at those things. And I think it's really important to engage our community. and our parents and our teachers. And I do understand the idea of streamlining, but I also think that it's important to have the district guiding a lot of this, and it doesn't feel that way to me right now. And that's not a criticism of you, David. It's just how it's coming across to me.
Elizabeth,
And one other relationship I just want to mention when it comes to performing in visual arts is that the University of North Carolina School of the Arts is indeed in Winston-Salem, and I would hope that we would be developing an intentional relationship with them, because they do have a high school, and it is indeed a public high school, and I would love to see more of our children able to go to school there, not in any way to diminish Reynolds. And then the one other concern, I'm just putting them all out there at one time, is that Brunson is already having issues with having space for any magnet programs because the academically gifted program is housed there. And I would be concerned about tying Brunson in with the highly academically gifted program in with entire sort of a STEM program. So just a lot of bunch of things I'm just putting on the table. So thank you.
So Elizabeth, when you say the district, surveying the district, and David referenced sitting down with members of in central office. So are you saying more of the public? That you don't mean?
I would say I would mean teachers. I would mean our parents. I would mean board members.
Okay.
But I would definitely mean the community. Thank you.
Madam Chair, were you going to ask a question?
Go ahead.
So, well, I just sort of wanted if you could, because I thought in some of your slides at the end, you had talked about how we're going to kind of do that a little bit. I don't want to jump the gun, but also in this presentation itself, I thought there was some mention of some of that work having been done already, talking to some groups of people, some key staff members, things of that nature. So I just want to understand.
Yeah, so David, and David, I don't know if you want to describe your initial steps when you got started in the beginning of this contract. I know that they've also gotten a report from Foresight Futures. One of the things that we're going to be, that I'll just mention now, is we heard at the last, when Foresight Futures presented, there were specific groups of our stakeholders that did not have as much of a voice as we would have wanted to. And if you remember that evening, they actually worked with the data to try to represent those voices, but we do not think that it is adequate at this time. And so we also met with Adam, with Foresight Futures, and Layla with the Ed Foundation and our district team. And so we have plans, it's on the final slide of the night, to actually get back out into our community and get more representation from some of our underserved communities that the data kind of had to be manipulated to represent more voices, if you remember that. And so this is a fact finding. David and Cooperative Strategies were given a charge to look at locations, look at programming, meet with folks. And I mean, this has been a year in the making. If I wasn't even here when this started, actually, David, but so to me, tonight is about uncovering what their research has been over the past year. Couple that with doing more work in the community to find out what are the needs of our community, and actually being intentional about getting into some of our underrepresented groups so that we can hear more from those groups. And then to start to come together with board members, with cabinet, with teachers, with others, to figure out what we're going to do. How is now all of this going to turn into a future plan? So it is not, to me, it's kind of a comprehensive process. And trust me, we're all learning as we go through this because there's so much to it. Magnets are one part of our bigger picture. And they were intended for a very specific purpose. And one of the most important things we can do is, are they meeting a purpose? Are they actually doing what they say they're going to do? Are they strong programs, as they were intended to be when designed? Are we investing enough in them? And so there's a lot of, to me, right now, uncovering that we're having to do, and this is part of that process. David, did I capture that accurately?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And yeah, so the process we had started with a rhythm of engagements that were interrupted with the pandemic, and then frankly put on pause for the latter half of the summer, early fall, and we picked this back up in later fall, and looking at some of these analyses on the buildings and appropriateness of fit in terms of the programs, and then started to work with Superintendent McManus as she onboarded, and the cabinet to frame out the rest of the engagements. And our dialogue of engagement has been to work with the district and to work with Forsyth Futures as getting out into that community and getting that broad level feedback, and from district knowledge of that community sentiment and so forth, and weaving that in to some of the suggestions. And at present, what that feedback has done is it has taken from the district feedback. The communication to us was the multiple intelligences program and the experiential learning programs are not operating as comprehensive, focused, well-resourced, intentional K-12 feeders, that they're just not. And so if we're looking to streamline, that is a sort of the proverbial low-hanging fruit place to start. And then from there, we actually paused our process that we originally conceived of when Forsyth Futures was brought on, so that we could get that community sentiment and use that as part of the filter in terms of where to emphasize programming. And so what that has done at this point is just simply, to the degree that it's been finalized, which I know it's still, there's work in process, at least the current data is emphasizing that demand for STEM and for the arts. And so the concentration right now is with those in mind, and assuming that we keep IB and dual languages, and that we build in off of the visual performing arts and STEM, where would be the best fit from an accessibility standpoint, facility and capacity standpoint. And as continued engagements come in and help to refine some of that information, we can look at the options in that light. Okay.
All right, I have a question for you about the costs from page 4.
Yeah.
And these look like, one-time renovation, capital.
They are.
Expenditures. Do you have any estimates for what, annual investments will be in these programs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And we scoured looking at different states and doing some trying to look at correlations between states that and districts that were large enough to have dedicated magnets, and what were the cost differences between their standard elementary and standard middle school programming and the magnet programs and choice programs. And what we found was quite a bit of noise in the data on that, and that and frankly, intuitively, that makes some sense. There's programs are offered at operating at very different levels of being resourced. Apologize for the dogs in the background. But what we found is that there are some programs where you saw a noticeable increase, 10, 20% annual operating costs, and some where it was nominal to none. And that, I think, part of the general takeaway from that information that we gathered was it's going to be hard to make an apples to apples comparison without doing, really knowing what the programs offer and what they don't. But you should expect that you're going to be spending a bit more on your annual operating of these programs if you are putting in the human resources and the capital resources, operating expenses that would go with having a robust STEM program, or the arts. They just cost more. And what we've seen is, anywhere from low single digits to close to 20% annual increase in ongoing costs.
Okay, and then also in line with the cost part, I can understand substantial one-time costs associated with visual performing arts, for stage, sound rooms, and that kind of thing, and absolutely for STEM with class.
Mm-hmm.
We understand 7.5 million for dual languages. I don't have really any idea what facilities.
So that's we can show you, and we'll submit the full analysis of that. You can look at the space itemization and cost estimates by square foot and what constitutes those different assumptions. And they are assumptions, but what I can tell you is what that includes are things like flexible STEM spaces, maker spaces, call them what you will, project-based spaces, teacher collaboration areas. If you're going to have, I'm doing this from memory here, but teacher collaboration spaces, you have these kinds of integrated programs where you're learning through a discipline rather than about a discipline. That implies collaboration and need for that at the staff, at the level, at the teaching level. So providing space for that, having some of those extended learning flex areas. So they are, to be fair, more auxiliary and desired for languages and STEM, say, than say if you're going to be having a performance, you need a performance space. That's a little bit more black and white. You are correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yes. And
I'm sorry. So on this slide, just for clarification, this should be currently where we are holding the programs, correct?
This is where you are currently holding them. Yes.
Okay. So
this is
clarification. Does Ashley have our dual language program? That's what I thought. So Ashley doesn't have a dual language program, but Smith Farm does. So I just wonder if I'm just trying to make sure I understand what's being presented. That this is not about future changes, but this slide should represent where we are right now.
Correct.
No, I think Ashley, the idea didn't change.
I don't think they have the dual language program, and it's at Smith
I
Farm.
thought it kind of left with the principal.
Yes, but I mean, it's large. I keep looking back at the left, but I thought that, and so I just want to make sure that what we're looking at is accurate, and then the public, if we're saying, because I think if you would look at the slide, we're not sure. I mean, I'm not clear on that. Because it's just, I don't want people in the community to think that we might have a program somewhere currently if we're saying this is our current situation.
Speaking board, I just wanted to share, Ashley is not taking the new language this year. They were originally when we started the study, but they are not doing the language.
Okay. And just for clarification, but we still have it going on at Smith Farm.
Yes, we still have it at Smith Farm. It's just not a magnet.
Right.
We still have it at Smith Farm.
Yeah.
We also have it at Old Town, East Town. Yeah.
And so those, because they're not magnets, but they're programs, is why we're not including them in this, David?
Yes, but they're on another slide. We can include it later on the next slide. I believe to show some of the other programs that have dual language that is not a magnet.
So I guess for you, David, on this, as far as unless it's a magnet, we're not talking about the cost that those particular programs would need at those schools. It has to be referred to as a magnet before we come on the slide.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. And we know that there's been some fluidity there. And this, this was time stamped back a year ago when we started, but yeah.
All right, are there any other, I'm looking to see if any hands are up from the Teams participants, and having not seen any.
Okay.
Turn it back over to you, David.
Okay. All right, so let's getting back into it here. Let's see. All right. Also, it's worth noting that IB program. In terms of creating multiple feeders that follow the same pathway of a 2 to 1 to 1, this may be an exception given the high resource demands of IB from a licensing standpoint, and given demand, this may be an exception, more of a 1 to 1 to 1. To be discussed. And then also that the early college and middle college programs are also sort of exceptions to this K-12 feeder, given the nature of their programs and the collaboration at Forsyth Technical Institute. So when part of our wonderings as a team in looking through the Forsyth Future data when we brought to the cabinet was, hey, IB, that was didn't seem to have as strong a demand in the survey data as STEM and visual performing arts did. Is this something that that we want to build an investment plan around to consider for the long haul? And the general takeaway from meeting with your executive team was, yes, we want to really improve and resource that program and work on professional development around it and determine, is it in the right locations? Do parents know about it? Do we have the right resources there to make it succeed? Because that IB diploma is so valuable, and the takeaway was, let's build it, let's make it stronger. And then questions being, okay, so what about the location? And dual languages? Should the languages component be a separate standalone program rather, or embedded as it is in IB, or maybe with one of the other programs? So that's one of the open questions. Current assumption is sticking with IB, but these are, of course, things that can be considered. Scenarios. When we look at different scenarios here, we think of things that are mutually exclusive. Choose your own adventure, path A, path B. Currently, these programs where they are for visual performing arts, what we have as of right now, Mineral Springs and Diggs Latham, feeding into Mineral Springs Middle to RJ Reynolds. Now, given, the RJ Reynolds High School, and it is a prime facility for this kind of program, you want to keep a good thing going, obviously there. But that's your current pathway. And then IB, dual languages, we have SPEES to Paisley to Parkland. And STEM, we have Brunson to Haynes at Hill, Wiley, and Atkins. And we know that the STEM program has also had significant overlap with the HAG program, and that there's discussion on that, on the benefits and the challenges of that coupling, and right now that's we can kind of see where the options lay on that. So option one is, of course, status quo. What we have works. Let's keep it. And here you can see here where.
Could you back up one slide, please? First, let me. Ms. Parker had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in determining your IB, and I know it's expensive and that was a determination, but did you look at number of children who applied to those magnets? And is that how you came up with the determination of what, was it a factor in one of your determining factors in figuring that it wasn't something that was good?
Oh, okay. So let me make sure I understand the question. And I may phone a friend on this one to Oman if he's present. But the part of the discussion was that the program, the desirability of keeping the program in the district was a cabinet level discussion of the benefits that that the team had seen for IB programs, not only in what they gave students, not only graduates here in Winston, but in districts that other folks in the cabinet level had worked in, and saying that there's a lot of potential, a lot of opportunity, and a lot of doors that an IB diploma opens. We want that for our kids. We already have it, and we just need to make it stronger. I don't know, Superintendent McManus, Oman, if you wanted to elaborate on anything that I just said there, or others.
No, I don't know if Home has exact data on number of applicants that are applying. I know that was Board Member Parker's specific question. I don't have anything to add to what you just said, David. That's accurate. Home, do you have specific numbers?
Good evening, folks. I don't have an exact number right now, but they do have a strong applicant pool for sure for the IB program.
And hold on, from my perception, and that's just perception, it would be that it is lower at the elementary level, but strong at the middle and high level from an applicant standpoint.
Actually, since SPEES has become our IB program, it has had quite an interest at the elementary level, especially coupled with their dual language program there. So it's been, and that's sort of the intention, build it up at the elementary school level, and they have been doing that for sure.
Well, and that's my perception, that SPEES is very, very popular from a dual language standpoint.
Yes, correct. But they're even with their dual language, the IB component there. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I just have one clarification. So Homan made me think, so Homan's language was that combined with the dual language program. And so I just, again, thinking so that we're all on the same page, dual language is a program, it's not a magnet. And so, throughout the slides, we always put the dual language with the IB program, but we also know that we have programs somewhere else. I just want to make sure that, our community, if we're transparent and we're showing that really the magnet on here is the IB, not the dual language. It's not the program. It may be coupled at some schools, right? I mean, the dual language is not part of the IB curriculum.
That is correct. The IB curriculum
It's
can be standalone outside of the dual language.
Right. And so
Yeah.
I just think that that's part of that is just, like right now, if I were to do a magnet, am I doing a magnet application to dual language? Or am I doing a magnet application to IB, or I get both? I'm just wanting to make sure that people understand what we're saying. Is that what I'm saying?
So technically, all of them are programs. IB is a program, dual language is a program. Magnet is just how you get to the building.
Right.
Magnet is how you draw your community to the building. And then IB does have a language component. So part of the IB program, there needs to be some language included as well.
So but the IB, that language, it's not that, so if I'm at Paisley, am I there in the IB program, or am I there in the IB dual language program?
So Paisley has been a magnet program for its IB, but this is the first year we've also added dual language. That's our middle school extension as well as East Foresight. So now the students moving into Paisley will have IB and they have dual language.
And so I'm in the IB program, it's expected that I have IB and the dual language.
Well, like I said, IB has to have a language. So some kids are getting it as a language exploration. And now we have kids this year that for the first time will also have the opportunity to have IB and dual language in middle school. We did not have that before.
Ms. Grant, maybe sometime for a curriculum presentation, we could have like what they are offered now with them. I mean, I'm a little shaky too, on what the difference is, or how we're kind of intermingling the two or whatever. That would be helpful. Just sometime we have time in curriculum, that'd be great. Thank you.
Ms. Grant, I'm sorry. So to teach IB, you have to be certified to teach IB, right?
So, yeah, so for IB, I'm kind of follow the line here. In order to be in an IB program, we have to pay membership to the IB organization. We have to have training. Our teachers have to go through intensive training for IB. And then we pay membership fee and we have an evaluation from IB. So the teacher should have professional development.
So with the dual language, what's it like?
With dual language, the teachers are teaching the general state standards through the language of Spanish or Chinese like Chicano. So dual language is it's a language of use for the content teaching. And there are specific strategies, and teachers go to training for those strategies.
And I have one question about the STEM scenarios, and that is that Wiley is actually a STEAM school, and more of the children from that school go to Reynolds High School or continue in the arts, or because it's a neighborhood school. I mean, Homa can correct me, but I don't know many kids from Wiley going to Athens. So that,
It's captured, it will be captured later, that there's STEAM. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yes, ma'am. So there are students that do go to Atkins. Of course, as you mentioned, because of their close proximity to a lot of students, I opt to go to Reynolds just because sort of that's feeder for the rest of the middle school students that are residential.
so Homa, how many, I mean, is it a significant portion of Wiley students that are currently, as this diagram shows, tracking to Atkins?
I wouldn't say Atkins pulls. It doesn't only pull from Haynes. It does pull countywide, and so it's not just like just the two schools are feeding into it. So I wouldn't say there's a significant number there, but there are some with our choice plan. Magnets are open, so entry level for 9th grade at Atkins is not just for students that are in the STEM program. Other students do apply and go there. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Dave, we're going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, yeah, no problem. I just wanted to emphasize something Dr. Grant said about, at least that I believe I heard right, about the distinguishing between the magnet as the path to get it in the program itself. And that's kind of when we look at dual languages, you're right, it's been tied as a program to the IB. And that's one of those open discussions is, would that program potentially be coupled with another program that would be a magnet choice pathway to get there, and with that the different options. So we have here is our sort of our status quo, and this is what it looks like from a feeder chart. This is what it looks like geographically. You can see the visual performing arts there in purple. You can
I'm
see.
sorry for the delay, but can I ask one quick question?
Sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
I know that you were showing STEM, but technically Atkins is a STEAM, and is that possibly why there's a Wiley connection? Is because there's arts at Wiley that also have a lot of science with it, and the STEAM piece comes over. They have a great music program at Atkins.
My point was that there's no more kids from Wiley than any other middle school in the county probably going to Atkins. I think the more direct route is from Haynes. They probably have.
Oh, the majority do. The majority do,
right.
But
with the STEAM component and Wiley, you can throw a rock from Wiley and hit Reynolds. More kids are going to tree up through that, unless they really want to keep the STEM component part. Then they would still look elsewhere. I don't think any more at Wiley than any other middle school.
There's another component to that, which that is what I'm actually was trying to head to, is that the music component, there is a very strong correlation between having a music component and math. That math scores that have the music components with it actually go up dramatically. And there's multiple studies.
Yeah, but that doesn't make it an arts magnet. Just because you have a music program isn't an arts magnet.
Well, the STEAM just is for that math, that music piece brings your math scores up.
Right, I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying that I don't know. Is Atkins technically STEAM or STEM?
It's STEAM.
Yeah, and for the, if I may, as we were working through these options, I just, given where I've seen in other districts go with this and what's working, having the STEAM instead of STEM, it makes a lot of sense. It's the additive difference between a STEAM and a STEM program in terms of how we want to plan for it. You're going to be doing art of some kind anyway. So it makes a lot of sense. And it's just sort of an emphasis on the program, of course. And so we could think about the end state here. We know what's our end state. It's going to be some kind of arts, visual performing arts feeder that's defined, accessible, robust. It's going to be some kind of IB program that's the same, some kind of STEAM program. Likely it's the same, and we can debate STEM, STEAM as we go forward, but it seems natural to me that we would want to maybe lean on the STEAM unless specific reasons would dictate otherwise when looking at those two. But for now, your STEM STEAM program, that's in the blue there, Ashley Spees, Paisley, and then you see the IB as well I'm sorry, the Ashley Spees is IB, and then the STEAM. I got tripped up there on Brunson, Hayes, and Atkins. So looking at a different scenario is we could change some program locations to provide some greater geographic accessibility. So for example, visual and performing arts, currently Mineral Springs, Diggs Latham to Mineral Springs to Reynolds. An option that we could look at, and we can look at that, geographically here too, is making Conoke, hopefully I'm saying that right for taking me 10 times, but I think I'm there. And then having Philo Hill as a middle school STEAM option, and potentially feeding in to Atkins as well. Karen, did you want to chime in on sort of the evolution of this particular option?
Sure. So what we were trying to do with this one was kind of find geographically separate schools. So Mineral Springs is a great location for that program. We wanted to leave that alone. Conoke is on the other side of the district. We thought this would provide more accessibility. And with Philo Hill being right there next to Conoke, and it's being rebuilt as a STEAM school, our idea with this was to have it be more of an exploratory program. So students, if they fall in love with the arts, they can go to Reynolds High School, and that's great. And if they fall more in line with the STEM side of things, they can move to Atkins. And you mentioned that Atkins also has a STEAM concept as well. So it would provide two pathways for students that attend Philo Hill in this case.
So with that scenario, you would take Diggs Latham away from being in arts magnet.
And the same with Wiley as a STEAM magnet. That's
Right. There again, do we look at numbers of children who chose that as a magnet option?
I'm sorry, was that for Diggs Latham?
Diggs Latham and Wiley.
And Wiley. Yes, ma'am. So Diggs Latham has, a decent participation. As you know, traditionally here, I wouldn't, say something like, the amount of the downtown school or more applicants come in, but they do have a good, decent participation in magnets. Now, Wiley, as some of you know, the reason the STEAM program was placed there back a while back was to retain some of the residential students that were choicing out, especially particularly to Jefferson in that zone, and that is been accomplished over the years, and the numbers have gone up. It used to be underutilized, but they are right there where they need to be right now, basically.
And Hamon, I would also wonder in the past maybe 3 years if you haven't seen some of the residential Diggs Latham come back. I mean, my perception just from knowing some folks that have come back here, that might be the case.
Yes, ma'am. Same thing with Diggs Latham. They got a strong program there, so they do and also their residential students for sure.
Can I make one comment before we keep going, Ms. Crowley? Is that okay, Member
Yes.
Crowley?
Yes.
I just want to make sure that, because all of this is, again, I said earlier, but I want to reiterate it. This is not a plan that we're moving forward on. This is more data, based on research that's been done throughout the last year. So I just want to make sure that that is very clear. The purpose of bringing something forward to a committee is for exactly what's happening now. Input, feedback from everybody. It is another piece of data. I just want to make sure, because I don't want anybody who's listening to go, oh, wait, we're not going to do that at this school. Please make sure everyone knows another session to gather more feedback data as part of a bigger picture. Thank you.
Given those comments, one of the things that's sort of kind of turning the wheels in my head is the sort of current status of like the magnet wiring side. I'd like to understand a little bit more about, what the current magnet program is and what it's doing since the original purpose was, that's what people have stated versus right this minute, and what a change might do how people in the building feel, right? So I think the other piece is that, and I know it's a part of the process, but I just, one of the things I guess I just want to make sure that we're careful about is people are watching this, is that when they're looking at this information, that their feedback will be solicited at some point.
Absolutely.
Yes, and so the scenarios that we're creating at this stage in the process are intended to try to visualize and to look at the capacity, locations, and population, and try to come up with different scenarios of best fit, to get feedback on the benefits and challenges of those, and then with that feedback and further information, create the plan. And so this is still an interim step along the way. So, for example, we were mentioning the Diggs Latham and Live and Attend, and we have matrices that you can have access to as part of the sort of the appendix data behind here. We have, for example, 485 kids who attend that school. Of those kids, 255 live in the boundary and attend the school. And so the delta is moving in from elsewhere, and we can see where they're moving from, so we have a real good sense about where folks are choicing in from where to where, and that's also part of behind here. But really, right now, looking at this potential scenario of moving, for example, this program here, the arts, the STEAM, is you have that physical connection there between Conoke, File Hill, and Mineral Springs Elementary Middle that can help potentially in this scenario sort of build that programmatic elemental strength in feeder. What challenges would you all say this scenario, if enacted, would bring up? Like what we're going to take notes here. So what might we anticipate be some challenges to this scenario?
Ms. Highsmith, go ahead.
Yes, the main challenge that I would see is that recently it was proposed that Follow Hill would be a state-of-the-art arts magnet school, and the Conoke Hills community has been sort of buying into that, and we have a lot of artists and musicians who live in the Conoke Hills area. So that would be an issue going forward, because that was presented to us earlier this year as where Follow may be going.
Got it.
Yeah, I think that school has had a couple different magnet options proposed for it, and I'm not real clear on where we are now. I know one time we talked about a STEM, but it didn't make sense because Haynes on the Hill is right down the road from it, and it's a STEM magnet. So having two on the same side of the county, within a few miles of each other, didn't really
Yeah, the school is still being built for state-of-the-art arts programming but there is a strong, again, some of the feedback was about STEM. So we actually have another round of feedback coming directly to the students in the school to see what the community, not the community, parents, students, again, in our first round of outreach, it was not representative enough of the entire community and the students that actually attend Philo. So we're reaching out one more time before we finalize all the plans there. But yes, it's already being built. The construction's already planned to include everything for state-of-the-art arts facility.
Also, I heard something about some CTE.
The CTE courses that go along with the arts and STEM would be part of the program.
Okay. Possible opportunity there, given the emphasis on the arts and the facility and the program there. Question would be how the STEAM program would dovetail with that, and the challenge would be that you would change yet again sort of the programmatic design there if you swing too hard on the STEM and not the arts. Other challenges to this feeder here. Again, looking at the visual performing arts and a possible STEAM middle school path that you could jump from to either a STEAM focus or an arts focus in high school.
I don't see where it will help with using magnets to diversify high schools at all. I don't see like a different population coming into a school that needs an influx of, kids that aren't already there. So I don't see where that it will help us with, what we originally said about using magnets to help diversify our schools.
Okay. And would a path to address that be changing the high school that the program resides in, or would there be another strategy to do that?
Well, so I would say that for me, it's the function. A lot of times, I know it won't necessarily change like the entire makeup of a school. Like if you take Parkland, for example, having an IB program within the building, I think creates a dynamic within the building, sort of stronger kind of students who are doing really good work in the building. It creates a sort of culture where there's some academic excellence going on, and sort of it helps with the culture of the building. And although it's a sort of small change, it is, I think, a variant. If you look at the sort of population of a school like Parkland, population of the IB program, I think it does diversify the building some. Although I do agree that I don't think the purpose of a magnet should be in and of itself to diversify.
All right, we have a speaker up here. Is that you? Yes, you do. All right, sorry, I recognize you. All right, we have Ms. Campbell is going to ask a question.
I was just looking at the distance from Middle Springs to the middle school, the elementary school, Middle Springs to Hollow. So are they going to have the STEAM, if someone from middle school wanted to do the STEAM, they would have to go to Follow, correct? So,
Anybody in the county who would want to do STEAM at Philo Hill would be eligible to as a magnet.
Okay.
So they could be coming in from Blues Creek or Comptown,
These are here.
So that what this chart shows is that if you came through Mineral Springs or Philo Hill, you would get a seat at Reynolds High School. You don't have to go there, but you could, that's how you continue the program. And I think one of the questions here too is, looking at, did we survey about the likelihood of families tracking through elementary, middle, and high in one magnet? And just from my own children's experience, we did different magnets for middle school, and then they wanted to do something different for high school. So just because a child starts at something elementary, there will be some that want to track it all the way through their 12th grade year, but for some, 3 years of STEM was a great exposure to STEM, and they wanted high school to be a little different. So
that's a fantastic question, observation, and was part of the discussion in thinking about a 2 to 1 to 1 as a good planning model for a program, because you plan for some attrition. In that way, if you have a 2 to 2 to 1, you're going to have an empty middle school because of some of the attrition, at least when you start. And this, we really want to position it so it's a growing from a position of strength rather than trying to dilute so much that we can't resource it very well. Okay. Okay.
Because I do think that some programs that are presently here that we change this up, it's going to be, it's taken them a few years to get there, and I don't know,
Right, like I think like a Wiley is really, I think, really is a draw, even, outside of maybe magnet offerings, and that probably helped it, but, what do you, I guess, is there fallout when you start to move some of those things? And honestly, in these slides and scenarios, it's hard to, you're asking for what could be the pros, cons types of things, but it's kind of hard for me to even say that, not having the date, it was supposed to be data driven, but I haven't seen that. I'm sure it's like somewhere where we're starting to see, how many residential students are going to dig Latham now, and so why would that, what's that data saying that maybe we could move that magnet, but I haven't seen any of that. And so without seeing all that stuff in the background, I really don't even want to try to, comment on what I think about those things, because I just don't think I'm prepared.
So I can
a while back with hold on, but there's so much that goes into that data, because a kid could pick a school and he's out of zones, and we think it's for the magnet, and really it's for the soccer team. So or really it's because his girlfriend goes there. So it's very hard to know. I mean, until we have better survey information about exactly why people would pick schools, are they going to the school for the program, or is it for some other reason? I think it's really hard to know what some of it's transportation, because I'm close to, somebody in the family that, there's just lots of different things. And I know that as a board, we spent some time in the room 219, and we kind of walked through the process, right, with the kind of the stickies and the different things. But that was, I think we just kind of scratched the surface on that. So again, I'm just not sure without having that.
Well, and if I may, I think what I'd like to do is kind of go through kind of the other options here and just get a touch point. I will take a quick reset back to sort of the initial conversation that we had with you all back when we could meet in person. Was looking at some of this live attend analysis and doing comparisons of attraction to school versus attraction to zone, not by surveying, but looking at actual choice behavior, where kids are actually coming and going to what degrees, and trying to get some ideas to why. And we could see that there were some areas that were substantially more attractive, where individual programs seemed to have a much higher attraction rate than did the zone that they resided in, and others it was flat in sort of an opposite. So we do have some of that data that we can make some of these conjectures, and that's where the survey data, the sort of qualitative data helps. On top of that is to trying to tease out some of the why as opposed to in addition to the what. But let me moving on here. I wanted to look at, say, our next scenario for IB. Currently, we're at Spies, Paisley, Parkland, and one option to consider is to add in Ashley, and as a part of a process to strengthen the IB program overall and professional development. That's outside our scope here, of course, but this is just parroting what we've heard from Cabinet in looking at this program. And then, Ashley is planned for additional seats anyway, and we could, look at creating some diversification in elementary access. Again, looking at that planned attrition up to the middle school level, some kids are going to drop out. That may help build some demand for the program and strengthen it in numbers if we're providing access to it in more than one location at the beginning levels. And
so I think, David, I think the program, I know the program used to be at Ashley for a number of years, and I didn't get the impression it was successful there. Is that true?
I would refer to the district on.
Yeah, so we tried the program at Ashley for at least 10 years.
Like, are you talking about an IB program?
Correct.
It's
That's where it started.
It started at Ashley. Let me just say, I also think that there were, things outside of the program offering there that caused issues. And so I don't know that it's fair to say that if it were put there and implemented, especially put in a new Ashley facility and implemented with fidelity and the right type of training, and get into what we see at speed. I'm not saying that wouldn't be a viable location, but some historical things there that show that it didn't work.
Yeah, we can keep moving. Again, these are all just options, but I will tell you, anywhere we decide to put a school, if that's what the district, the community, the teachers, if that's going to be good for kids, I can promise you we're going to make it successful, because we control the success of these schools. So if anywhere we put a magnet.
Yeah, and I don't think it happens.
Right.
Yeah, the other thing I think I would say is that it's the reason why this scenario, this option, to me, it was scenario option thing. It's to me is a little bit, as I'm looking at it, I kind of like it a little bit hard, because now currently Ashley's capacity. Ashley's not in capacity, right? So if you look at a potential draw, I think this could certainly be something that's good, because they're not, I think, anywhere near where they could be in terms of what the capacity of the building is. Also, I would say that I think it's, as we're moving forward, it just, to me, it's important that, which I'm sure this is being done, is sort of looking at the capacity of these buildings, whether or not they're currently at capacity, versus, what it would take to fill that. Because I think that part of it, and one of the reasons why I guess it's been hard for my brain to kind of wrap around this is because, in my mind, one of the reasons why choices are happening in the way that they're happening has a lot of different factors. I think one of the organs alluded to that earlier, that sometimes it's the magnet itself, but sometimes it's the perception of that school. Sometimes,
yep.
I think there are a variety of factors we have and some of those things are going to take a little bit more to address than others.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's an excellent point. Capacity is key, and I heard most of that, but it was a little bit difficult to be frank. Capacity is essential, and part what our goals is that when we're looking at any change in location, or even looking at the current location, would be to ensure that local students aren't forced out of a local option, but rather that there's sufficient permanent capacity, not temporary buildings, not modulars, but sufficient permanent capacity to allow for a shared program there at that site. Okay. The dual languages, just to show where they currently are. Chinese immersion is one class at, this is my understanding, at Conoke. And feeding to Paisley to Parkland. Spanish, Spies, Paisley to Parkland. And then here's your dual language, also ending in Parkland through Paisley, or Dayslafe and Eastham, Old Town Smith Farm. And these are programs that are fairly disparate and small, generally speaking, especially there at the Chinese immersion. And that was one of the discussions moving forward as an option would be, do you try to resource that? Is there sufficient demand for Chinese immersion to build a program around it, or is it more of a class that isn't so much of a magnet choice that you would build a K-12 feeder for? It appears at the moment that the demand is fairly low. For Spanish immersion, an idea would be for diversification, if you're going to have it as a separate feeder, to look at Spies and Smith Farm feeding into Paisley and East Forsyth to Parkland. And I'll show you kind of some of the rationale there is to spread out access, sort of at a diagonal there, from northwest to southeast and vice versa a bit at the middle school levels, given where there's local capacity, school density, and population. So again, this is thought exercise. If you were going to decouple these programs from IB, what you could consider it this way, even though currently it's with IB at Spies, for example.
For the Chinese immersion, is it Mandarin? Is that what the street is Mandarin? Thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
And David, do you all look at what the demand is for these in other districts? I mean, like, I know I used to live in Charlotte, and there was a Chinese immersion school there that was wildly popular. You know, one of the largest high schools in the state. Myers Park High School is an IB magnet. So I guess I'm just wondering if there might be demand if we were offering them.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have seen it. I've seen it both ways. You know, our firm does demographic work for Charlotte, and you know, you see the demand there for that program. I know that's you've got a very large district, and that helps. I've also worked with a previous client that in their elementary visual performing arts, they coupled that with dual language and are dropping the Chinese immersion simply because the demand was not high enough to justify the resource drain that was given, while not providing enough time for the kids who are trying to be immersed in a dual language program to master the Spanish for those who were not native Spanish speakers. So I think it's very particular if you're looking at some future survey work, sort of that qualitative feedback. I think that would be a good one to test, because right now, just given the size of the program, that it doesn't seem to evidence that demand, at least here for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And then I know I took quite a bit of time here, so forgive me. I just want to give an overview and then comments, questions as you are thinking on this, and probably more thoughts will come later than can come on the fly right now. Please send those to Lisa, and those will get to us. And then looking at the STEM program here.
If you don't mind, Dave, we have one
Oh
question.
no, go ahead, please.
Back to the dual language, this is what Ms. Parker was talking about, and Ms. Grant, I'd just love to know if the Old Town and Easton and the other programs, are those native Spanish speakers that were being served there? How is that programming different than the official dual language immersion? Because you're getting a different population there, and that, it's great to serve native Spanish speakers as much as we can and build them up. So I just love to, continue to piece that together.
Mm.
I know as I was visiting Dick Latham the other day, it was for the native Spanish speakers that were in the dual immersion program. Nicolette, can you come up and respond really quickly to the question around which you mentioned Old Town, Easton. Are these being served in the immersion in the dual language programs?
So we have both two-way and one-way immersion. When you have a one-way immersion, you typically have one language group, maybe the native Spanish speakers who are in that program. Two-way, you have both English and Spanish speakers. The dual language as a instructional strategy and a philosophy program is highly effective when done well, and that is one of the most successful in closing achievement gaps. And that's for African American students, Hispanic students, white students, students with disabilities, the socioeconomically diverse population. So if we can do it well, that is a highly effective program for all students.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm running over time here, so just wanted to kind of give this overview here of the STEM model as we look. Current feeder right now, again, some significant overlap there with the HAG program. An option would be to consider, because of the high demand, it appears not only in enrollment now, but in the survey from the Foresight Futures, this could be an exception to the 2-to-1 model, and with some further study, consider maybe a 3-to-2 model, having an explicit tie of HAG and STEM/STEAM, and a separate and apart STEM/STEAM program. And so there's significant overlap and possibilities for synergy there between those two programs, but also providing a separate pathway. So you could have Peachtree Moore as a STEM or STEAM, feeding to Wiley STEAM, feeding to Atkins, with a Brunson Hag STEAM to Hills at Haynes, where it is, through to Atkins. And then Atkins, as noted here, as we mentioned earlier, for the visual performing arts, it's potentially Philo Hill could be one of those splinter point or breaking points where you could go to the art side more or go to the STEAM side more, depending in middle school what draws you. So here's what that looks like, and some of the rationale is providing a central corridor of access along for the elementary programs here, center and then just a little bit south and west, and then a little bit north and east, your middle school programs there feeding into Atkins. So when we looking at population densities and accessibility, the local schools and how kids would have local choice, it seemed to be an option if the demand was sufficient, indeed proved sufficient to have these dual track. Okay, so that's got to note that it's looking like to kind of wrap up our section here and then pass it back to Oman and Superintendent McManus to any final concluding thoughts here. But again, going back to our main focus effort is to streamline, to find that quality and accessibility, sustainability. We know that the next steps include additional focus group meetings with community members who may not have participated in the survey, that feedback, that sentiment will be quantified and put into this process to help us go from sort of the idea phase, the what could we phase, down to what should we phase in creating a recommended pathway. So with that, I'd like to pass it back. Mrs. McManus, is there any concluding thoughts or wrap up that you'd like to add?
Yeah, so can you pull up, we have a couple of final slides that are give a little bit more detail about the step with getting more community voice. And thank you in advance to Foresight Futures and to the Foundation, Layla, for meeting with our team, Mark Batten, Brent Effie, some of our team members. They met after the presentation of the data from the survey was presented to this group. It was clear that we needed more voice from specific groups. So can you turn it for me? So basically, we are going to have during the months of April and May community forums targeting those underrepresented community members. And so basically, we're going to have increased accessibility with both in-person and virtual options. And we are going to work with a group. Part of the conversation was who could we have come in and actually facilitate some community meetings to get more voice. And so there's a group called National Conference for Community and Justice, or the Piedmont Triad, that will come in and facilitate those groups. Where we're going to need help, if you look at the next slide, is we need some of our community ambassadors to make sure we get the word out so that we can have as much voice and representation as possible. In addition, we can consider reopening the survey if there are folks that did not have a chance to do it that want to do it. But really, we think this going into communities and having a face-to-face option and virtual option will help us. We're just going to need a lot of outreach and PR prior to these meetings. We will work together to focus on strategy and design of these meetings, but our goal is to really gain a better understanding of how the entire community feels about our current choice plan, our magnet schools, all of the things that we're talking about tonight, which boil down to we want every student to have the highest quality education possible. So what does that look like? And the only way we're going to get there is to have people really have a voice. And so these are some next steps. We're also going to come back to cabinet in a couple of weeks to have a deeper dive with senior team. We're going to would like to do that with the board as well. But these conversations are definitely not one and done conversations. There's so much that goes into this work on how to provide the best education and what programs are going to be meet the needs of our students. And so basically, we've got a lot of conversations to happen. Obviously, going into the fall, that's not what this is for. It's for the following year as changes are made. So we've really got to make decisions. I will tell you that our decisions around schools are not, they cannot be one-off decisions. It really is looking at the whole picture. They're also not about one leader that's in that school. It really is about where is the school needed, and then how do we provide the right supports, the right training, the right tools to make the programming successful in the schools. And so we're going to be taking a very strategic approach as we move forward. And it's not just going to be things popping up here and there. It really is about how are we strategic in the design of what to offer our families and our students. So we'll be working very closely with our teacher groups, our community groups, this group. So any feedback after tonight, please provide that. And anything that was said was recorded, so we'll have that. And again, this is all just part of data gathering as we make our district the very best district possible for the students we serve.
Thank you.
Sure.
As a community ambassador, part of the committee, I think it's a great idea to get the community, because that's part of the organization I'm involved with, the Coalition for History and Education. We are already on that path of figuring out how do we get the community involved. And I think a tool that we could use is in the last year, over here, there's been a lot of information. So our struggle now is how do we package that information and give it to the public? So any help that the committee can provide, maybe get together, have an ambassador call with some people that we can have. We want to be on the same page and tell the same story. Now, when we get out of it, how they take it, that's on their own. But we need to make sure that even as ambassadors, we're telling the same story about what just transpired the last year and a half.
Absolutely. Ms. Campbell, thank you for that. And Mark, wave your hand, Mark. Please make sure, because that is one of our ambassador groups. So please get together at the end of the meeting. Thank you so much.
David, thank you for presenting today. We appreciate all the time and effort you put into this and given us a lot to think about as far as the next steps and how we proceed to make our magnet system more robust here. So thank you.
Oh, our pleasure. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Then can I have a motion to adjourn? Second. All those in favor? Thank you. We're adjourned.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.